Hey everyone, it's Christina and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. I want to take a little pause from the parks and I want to sit here and talk with you guys about movies. I grew up loving Disney movies, specifically the animated movies, all of them. I loved obviously the Renaissance classics, but I really loved the older movies too. And I'm talking about Robin Hood, I'm talking about Sleeping Beauty, The Rescuers, Rescuers Down Under. These were movies that are so nostalgic and mean so much to my childhood. And they've stayed with me even through my adult years. If I'm ever having a bad day, sometimes just turning on an old Disney animated movie just makes me feel so happy. So I wanted to find my little place on the internet to be able to share my love of all of these movies with you. And one of my absolute favorite movies that I thought would be cool to kind of kick this off is The Sword in the Stone. I have loved that movie ever since I was a little kid. I love The Little Mermaid. I love Aladdin, but I'm not gonna lie, Sword of the Stone is up there. It very much is up there. But before we go any further, make sure that you hit the subscribe button. Make sure that you comment on this video, and make sure that you let me know if there's any other types of content that you want to see, if there's any other movies that you want me to review. But for the sake of today, we're going to be talking about everything Sword in the Stone, so let's hop right into it. The Sword in the Stone is a 1963 American animated musical fantasy comedy film that was produced by Walt Disney and distributed by Buena Vista Distribution. And it was actually the very last Disney animated movie that was made during Walt Disney's lifetime. A lot of the music was done by the Sherman Brothers. This was actually the first movie that the Sherman Brothers created all of the music from. So they went on to do the music for Mary Poppins, The Jungle Book, The Aristocats, The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, 101 Dalmatians, and even Sleeping Beauty. The Sword in the Stone was the very first movie that they got to do. So just a little bit of trivia that you might not have known about the Sherman Brothers. We'll have to do a video specifically on the Sherman Brothers at one point because it's just really cool just how they had that really close relationship with Walt, and they just understood exactly what he was trying to convey through all of these movies, and they were able to just build amazing songs. And so yeah, there are some great songs in The Sword in the Stone. So let's kind of start from the very beginning of the movie. I'm not going to go into all of the nitty gritty, but I have the whole movie memorized kind of by heart. My mom used to tell me when I was a little kid that I knew every single line in that movie, and I don't think that she's wrong. I really do know the entire movie. So let's start from the very beginning. The classic storybook intro, and that's what I love about all of these old Disney movies is that they start with a storybook, and this beautiful song just opens up the story, and it lays out the foundation, basically talks about how this amazing king died and now there's no ruler and they don't know how to choose a ruler. And so right when he dies, this sword just comes out of the sky and it's placed into this solid anvil, and it literally has instructions. It literally says whoever pulls out this sword from this stone and anvil will become king born of England. So everyone's thinking, okay, cool, that's super easy. We'll find someone in no time. But over time, years go on by and no one's able to pull out the sword from the stone. So they just don't have a king for years and years and years. There's just no king. And that's when the movie starts. So the movie starts, we find Kay, who is the he's the older brother of the wart or Arthur. So Arthur gets adopted by this ward who lives in the castle. He has a son named Kay, and Arthur's job is basically to just be his assistant, do whatever he says. And so the first scene is the two of them out into the forest, and they're hunting. And right away we get introduced to Merlin and Archimedes. I love Archimedes. He's just my favorite. He's so funny. Even to this day, when I watch Sword in the Stone, I love Archimedes. He's so funny. He's so sassy. I think that's where I got a lot of my sassiness from as an adult. I think I just really idolized Archimedes. He's just so funny. He's like, honestly, he kind of reminds me of Enzo. Like if Enzo could talk, I feel like he would talk like Archimedes. Maybe he wouldn't have the same high pitch, or maybe he would. Archimedes and Merlin are having this conversation, and Merlin is telling Archimedes that I can see into the future, and I know that we're going to have a guest who's going to be coming to our house today. It's just funny how they have this really close relationship, but Archimedes is still skeptical of Merlin. So clearly Merlin's not always right, and that's why Archimedes has this skepticism that, like, look, old man, like, you might be right on some things, but you're definitely not right on everything. And he even calls him out at one point. He's like, do you know everything, Merlin? And Merlin's like, okay, fine, not everything. So it's really cute. They're almost like this like old married couple in like a very cute way. So Arthur's hunting in the forest. He gets lost. He gets chased by this hilarious wolf that that wolf is an unsung hero. You never see any merch for that wolf. I mean, I guess only like the old school fans of Disney are really going to understand how incredibly well thought out that wolf character was. It was so just funny. But what was great about that wolf and the whole movie in general is that it was really made for adults, but it was also made for children too. Like, there were so many elements that children would find so incredibly entertaining. Like, I thought that wolf was hilarious. Like, he's so clumsy. He's like obviously an oaf. He's not scary at all. He has maybe like 2 tiny little like fang teeth in his mouth. So you can't help but find him hilarious. Like, he's not scary at all, when in fact you would think that he would be scary because he's in this forest with Arthur. And Arthur is like a little kid. He's lost in this forest. But the whole sequence when the wolf is following him in the forest is just absolutely hilarious. And it's meant to be entertaining, not scary. And so Arthur falls through the roof of Merlin's house, and he has this conversation with Merlin, finds out that he's a wizard, and his mind is completely blown. He's like, oh, wow, I've never met anyone like you before, in which he has not. He's been a servant for his entire life. So this is the first time he's meeting a wizard, and this wizard has an interest in him, like a genuine interest in him. Arthur's not really sure why, but he's kind of going along with it because the wizard is so kind, and he looks like he knows what he's talking about. And plus he's got a talking owl, which is just super awesome. So then Arthur tells Merlin, like, hey, I need to leave. I need to go back and do my chores. And so Merlin, without any hesitation, he says, okay, cool. Well, I guess I'm coming with you. So then he goes into the first amazing song of the movie, where he packs up his entire house into a suitcase. Now, this was pre-Mary Poppins. I almost wonder if Merlin was the inspiration for Mary Poppins and her traveling suitcase, because remember, he put everything into the suitcase and then she takes everything out of the suitcase. So I wonder if there was like a little, maybe some foreshadowing, or maybe just kind of a reflection back and just paying homage to Merlin for being the original. So he packs everything into his suitcase. He goes with Arthur to the castle, and Arthur explains to his stepdad that, he brought back his wizard with him, and he's going to be staying with him. So then Merlin explains to the guy, like, hey, I'm here to, to tutor him and to, kind of be his mentor. And then he kind of shows him his power. Like, look, I am a wizard. Like, I'm not just some like old man, like in a blue robe. Like, you should take me seriously. And so then Stepdad's like, okay, cool. Yeah, you can stay here. And so he gives him this like totally rundown tower that he ends up staying in. And so he stays in the tower, and so Merlin is now staying at the castle with Arthur. And so now begins their big adventure together. And over the course of time, Merlin shows Arthur, basically he educates Arthur through life experience, which is almost like worse. It's like, bro, you come with me to like mentor me and tutor me. You would think that he would start with books. Like, okay, like maybe I'm going to start you with like these books, which he does eventually do. He does train Arthur with books, but first he sends him like the very first adventure they have. Arthur is turned into a fish. Merlin is turned into a fish, and he basically takes him into the moat, and they're swimming around, and Arthur learns how to swim. He learns how to maneuver himself underwater. The two of them get chased by a giant sturgeon in the middle of the moat, and that was actually, I would say, probably the scariest part of the movie, because they made that fish look super scary. It had like super sharp teeth. Its eyes were like yellow and red. Like, it was a really, really freaky looking fish. I mean, if somebody pushed me into a moat, I would probably cry just because I would be thinking about that fish. And so that whole thing happens, and almost immediately afterwards, we go and we see Arthur, who's in the kitchen, and he's literally washing all of the dishes for the castle. So you kind of get a little bit more a sense of what he does at this castle, because you hear him being called the ward, and you kind of get the idea that he's kind of like the servant boy. But when you see him actually in the kitchen and he's washing all the dishes, that's where you're like, oh my God, this little boy is a, do I say slave? I mean, he's not getting paid, and he's a little child. This is child labor. He's literally being forced to clean all of these dishes. And as he's doing it, he's singing the song that he and Merlin were singing when they were fish the day before. So you can already kind of get a sense that Merlin is having an impact on Arthur in a really, really beautiful way. Like, I'm going to cry, because Arthur is, you can just feel that he's just a very like just warm and kind-hearted and just very pure soul. So you can't help but just fall in love with him, like just almost immediately. And then he's got this short blonde hair. He's just a very cute, symmetrical smile. He's so skinny. Like, you just can't help but you like want to adopt him and like take care of him. Like, he's just so incredibly lovable. And so you can't help but just support Merlin in educating him. And then we all know at the end of the day that you are going to be Arthur, King Arthur and his Knights of the Round Table, that King Arthur. We all kind of know that that's what's eventually going to happen to him. But just seeing his story and just seeing how his whole journey transpires is just some of the magic of the movie. So next, Arthur becomes a squirrel. He becomes a squirrel and learns the challenges that a squirrel has to deal with. And what I would say Merlin's big lessons that he is bestowing upon Arthur in showing him the struggles of a fish and the struggles of a squirrel would be that you have to use your intellect. You've got to use your knowledge. You've got to use your wit, because a lot of the times you are going to be the smallest person in the room, or you are just not physically going to be able to fight off everybody. And that was basically what Merlin was teaching him, is that you're not always going to have the brute, or you're not always going to have the physical force. So how can you use your brain? How can you use your mind to get yourself out of these situations and to move forward? And so later on, actually, before I go on, I want to talk about the squirrel scene. So this female squirrel finds Arthur, and she's just completely smitten with him, and she's following him around, and she's so adorable. And it's so funny. Like, whenever I see that scene, I always see that female squirrel, and I'm always like, that's me. That's so me. I would say any girl who's just super girly girl and she's super into Disney, like, I would say that's like 99% of the women, like, for sure. She might not admit it readily, but I rest assured that's that most of them are like that. We are like that. We love to be loved. We want to be loved. That's it. It's not that hard. So Arthur eventually breaks her heart at the end because he turns back into a human, and she's super sad, and it's a really, really sad scene. And okay, so after this, Arthur kind of gets busted, and the ward and the maid, kind of like the lead maid, they find out that Arthur had left, and and Merlin actually cast a spell on all the dishes so that they would all be washed by magic. And everyone is super upset, so he basically tells Merlin to leave. So Merlin disappears, and the ward tells Arthur that he's not going to be able to be Kay's squire because that was something that was offered to him, and it was kind of like a reward for all of the hard work that he had been doing at the castle. But because of what he did, it was now being snatched away from him, and so we end the scene, and it's super sad. Everyone's sad. Merlin's upset. He disappears. Arthur's in tears, and he's defending Merlin, and he's basically saying, like, you don't know what he's like, and you don't know how things are done today. And that was the line that I used to say all the time to my own parents. Oh, hey, Romeo. This is one of my cats. This is Romeo. I know this is the first time you guys get to meet him because I'm always at the park, so you don't ever get to see my little Romeo. What is going on? Why is your neck all crusty? His neck is crusty. He is so I rescued him, and when I rescued him, they told me that they found him in I was trying to say trash can and dumpster at the same time. They found him in a dumpster at 2 weeks old. 2 weeks old, they found him in a dumpster, and his foster mom took care of him all the way up until he turned 4 months when I adopted him. And it's so funny. He truly is a trash cat because he always dives into the sink and he'll be like licking all the plates. And even when his brother Enzo is done eating, he'll go and lick his bowl. I'm like, geez, once a trash cat, always a trash cat. Yeah, he wants to talk to you guys too. So now we kind of move along in the story. So Arthur's super upset, but Merlin is still determined to keep teaching Arthur, and he's like, I have a plan for you, and we're gonna keep moving this forward. So next we find Archimedes teaching Arthur, and so he hops in and he starts teaching Arthur through books. And so there's this whole scene where they're going through all these books, and then Arthur starts talking about how it would be so cool to have wings and to be able to fly. And so then Merlin turns him to a bird, and so now we go into this flying sequence with Arthur and Archimedes, and it's really cute, and they're having so much fun. And then they both get chased by a hawk. So now it's, like, okay, here's the danger again. And so they both fly away. And then we meet an amazing, marvelous character who it is so underrated. You don't see her on anything. You don't really see her like as a villain either. Like, she should be a villain. She is such an amazing villain. Like, she's not highlighted nearly enough as she should be. And it's the magnificent, marvelous, mad Madam Mim. And I remember when I first was watching this movie very religiously, and she just reminded me of any old lady that you would see at the grocery store. I hope that's not a dig at old ladies, but she's just so cute. Her face is just nice and plump, and she's really, really short. Her hair is down and gray and floofy, and she's a little eccentric, a lot of old people are a little eccentric. And she's just adorable. And then I know you so badly want to just destroy all my stuff. I know, but you can't. I'm sorry, you cannot. Okay. So, so then she goes into her amazing song, and so she's basically like, I'm magnificent, marvelous, mad Madam Mim, and I love her. I think she's amazing. I think she's a villain, but she's not a bad villain. Maybe that's why she's not a villain, because she's kind of a doof. She's just kind of like a failure at being a villain. She's you can't be scared of her. You're not scared of Madam Mim. You're just not. But anyway, so she has Arthur, and so then Archimedes goes and gets Merlin and brings Merlin. And so then Merlin says, you got to give the wart back to me. And she's basically like, no, he's mine. And then they go into a duel. And so in this duel, they're fighting each other. They transform into different animals, and they're basically trying to destroy each other. And so then in the very end, and this is so amazing, this is literally what Merlin has been teaching Arthur the entire film. He turns himself into a germ, the tiniest organism possible, and he makes Mim get sick, and that's how he wins the duel. And I just thought, like, what a great way to really like summarize everything Merlin was trying to teach Arthur throughout the movie. He finally was able to make his point in the end. Like, see, that's what you got to know. You might not always be the biggest and the baddest and that. And Madame Mim, like the whole time they were dueling, she was always turning into something bigger or something more powerful or something with more, you know, like gusto. And then in the end, it was Merlin's wit that was able to help him win the duel. So now we get into an interesting place. So now Arthur becomes Kay's squire. And he's going to go to his first tournament. He's going to fight in his first tournament. And the winner of this tournament goes the crown. So the townspeople have completely abandoned the idea that they're going to be able to find anyone who's going to pull the sword out of this stupid stone, an anvil. So they're like, we need a king. We need somebody now. Whoever wins this tournament is going to be king. So Kay is entered into this tournament. Arthur is there basically making sure that he has all of his armor on and make sure that his sword is with him and that whatever he needs, he basically is attending to him. So they get to the tournament and almost immediately Arthur realizes that he left the sword at the inn, at the hotel that they were staying in. And so Archimedes is with him. Merlin got super upset that Arthur decided to go and be Kay's squire, that he disappeared. He goes to Bermuda. But I think this was calculated. I think Merlin knew exactly what he was doing. He was like, I don't want to be there for Arthur's big moment. I'm just going to go on vacation. I'm going to go on vacation. He knew exactly what he was doing. He knew exactly what was going to happen. But he was like, I'm going to peace out. Peace out. I will make my grand reappearance later. He knew exactly what he was doing. So Arthur and Archimedes are on their way back to the inn to go and get Kay's sword. And on their way back to the inn, they see the sword in the anvil in the courtyard. And Archimedes sees it, and so Arthur's like, okay, cool, well, maybe I can get this, because it turned out that the inn was locked. So they were like, okay, we need a plan B, so this is going to be our plan B. I'm going to go get the sword out of the stone, and we're going to be out of there. Right away, he puts his hand on the sword, and immediately it comes right out of the anvil. And they think nothing of it. They're like, hurry up, let's beeline it back to the tournament, which is what they did. They run back to the tournament. He gives the sword back to Kay, and then Kay's like, what the heck? This isn't my sword. And so then his dad's like, what the heck? And then he's like, wait a minute, Kay, like, what sword is this? And then he's reading the inscription and then realizes, oh my God, this is the sword. This is the sword that determines who the King of England is. And then everyone stops the entire tournament. Entire tournament stops. And then the ward is like, where did you get this sword? And Arthur is just very, very innocently and as pure as he can say it, he's like, I just pulled it out of a stone that was in a courtyard. And then everyone starts laughing. They're like, wait a minute, like, what? You pulled it out of this anvil? Like, that's so crazy. Like, no, you didn't. And Arthur, like, he didn't know what they were talking about. He was just like, you needed a sword. I just went to go get a sword. And that's what just makes me love Arthur so much. Like, he doesn't know what this sword is. This was way before he was even born. He didn't even know. So now everyone's like, all right, we're all going to go back to this courtyard and you're going to show us how you pulled the sword out of the stone. So everyone goes. The dad puts the sword back into the anvil and he's like, okay, like now show us the miracle. So Arthur rolls up his sleeves, and right as he's about to put his hand on the sword, his brother grabs his hand and he says, anyone can pull the sword out of the stone now that it's been pulled. So he grabs the sword and he's like, now let me do it. So he tries to pull it out, won't come out. And then a few other people come and they're all trying to like pull it out. No one can pull it out again. And then finally, some people are like, give Arthur a chance, give the boy a chance, blah, blah, blah. So then same thing happens. Arthur puts his hand on top of the sword. It comes right out of the anvil and he places it on the ground, and then the clouds part and then the sunshine is just coming down on him. And oh my God, I'm going to get emotional. I love that scene so, so much because it happened. Like he's finally become King Arthur. It's like Merlin couldn't have planned it any better. He knew he knew the progression of Arthur's training, and And I really think that by the time he went to Bermuda, he knew. He was like, all right, you're ready to go. The sword is actually right where it's supposed to be. You're gonna forget the sword. Like he knew exactly what was gonna happen. So now we cut to the very end of Arthur is sitting on the throne. The crown is too big for him. It's huge. And he's got his little robe. And so now he's like, okay, well, now I need to be a king. Like, what am I going to do? And so then right away, he's like, I wish Merlin was here. And he goes, Merlin, Merlin. And then Merlin comes right back, just in a ball of magic. He's got a tan. He's got his board shorts on. Like, he's got his sunglasses. He's like, I was in Bermuda. I was living my best life. And then he transforms back into a wizard. And then he's just like, so, like, what's up? Like, how's it going? How can I help you? And then Arthur's like, I'm king. And then Merlin's like, what? Oh, right. Yeah, of course. King Arthur and his Knights of the Round Table. And then they go into this really cute little kind of dialogue. And then Merlin's like, Arthur's like, round table. And then Merlin's like, oh, would you rather have a square one? And then Arthur's like, no, round would be fine. And it's just so cute. Like we know the magnificent and powerful King Arthur and how he led his Knights of the Round Table, and to just see him as a young boy, just so pure and just so innocent and sweet. I die every time I watch this movie. It's so incredible. And to know also that it was actually the last animated film during Walt's lifetime just makes it even more special. It's almost like it was his last gift to us, to the kids, that we're going to always watch this movie and refer back to it and love it for as long as they have. And I just still love it so much. Every time I see Merlin and Arthur in Magic Happens, the parade at Disneyland, I just go completely crazy. I go crazier for them than I do for any other animated character. I would say even Aladdin. Aladdin's cool, but I mean, I love Sword in the Stone. If I had to pick my favorite scene, it would be the end. It would be the end when he pulls out the sword from the anvil, because you know his story. You know everything that Arthur had to go through. He's an orphan, and he's basically a child laborer working in the castle, and he's so sweet and pure, and you just want him to be happy, and you want him to find success, and you want him to just be okay. So then when he becomes the king, it's like, okay, this little amazing child is going to be okay. So I would say that's probably my favorite scene in the movie. And favorite character, 100% Archimedes. Like I said, I absolutely love Archimedes. I think he's so funny and just so sassy and just like a really, really well thought out character. Other supporting characters that I really love too. We never ever talk about this character, but it's the squirrel, not the female squirrel that was in love with Arthur, but the female squirrel that was in love with Merlin was just an unsung hero. Like, she was so funny. Another character that really just like livens up the plot and just makes it more catered towards kids, because I could totally see how kids could get bored. Like if you didn't have characters, like if you didn't have the squirrel, if you didn't have Archimedes, if you didn't have the wolf, let me see. I'm trying to think of like other characters that like really like lightened up the plot. Madam Mim. I think you can make a huge case for Madam Mim. What else? In the scene when they turned into fish, there was a frog. There was a really, really cute little frog that was kind of messing with Arthur a little bit. That's also a character that just really helped to lighten up the plot and make it more relatable to kids. Because, yeah, if we didn't have any of those characters, then it would be probably a little scary, and it would almost be, I mean, okay, if I said that it was like Black Cauldron-like, then that might be a little extreme, but it would kind of be in that realm where, I mean, obviously it's not as scary as the Black Cauldron, but it would kind of be more in that where it's just mostly dialogue and not as much humor and not as much like lightheartedness to kind of move the storyline along. But maybe Black Cauldron's a movie that we'll do next time. One of the things I really enjoyed about Merlin specifically was that he never felt like a dad. I actually really liked that. I liked that he never felt like a dad to Arthur, even though Arthur never had a dad. He was very much like his teacher. Like he was very much like his mentor, his professor, and his educator. He was like someone who was literally passing knowledge on to Arthur. And I think in a lot of dynamics with fathers, this is purely my opinion, I could be completely wrong. There sometimes is an emphasis on education, but there isn't always, like usually the parents will be like, okay, well, go learn that in school or go someone else teach you, but I think that parents need to also consider themselves as educators too. Kids pay very close attention to what their parents are doing, to what their parents are saying. And I mean, why not learn from your parents? I mean, I could see how it could be hard. Also, I know for me personally, like I know my mom always like sent me to go learn things from other people, from dance classes to tutors to whoever. But I loved learning things from her, like I loved kind of observing her and just like doing the things that she was doing because that was someone who I like really looked up to. So I think in Sword in the Stone, just kind of seeing Merlin as this figure that's just passing on education in some way, it's in the best way that he knew how. It wasn't like he was like really teaching out of a book or anything like that. He was like, the way he taught Arthur was, my method is to just teach by doing. I'm just going to turn you into a fish and you're going to learn, just kind of, that's how you learn. So I think in our day-to-day lives, like when we're learning from our parents, like, maybe it doesn't have to be as complicated as going outside of your comfort zone too much. I mean, you're so intelligent and you have so much to offer. Like share your knowledge with young people. Young people are always interested in hearing what older people have to say, to a point, I would say. But yeah, I think that's gonna do it for us. Go ahead and subscribe if you haven't already. Give this video a like. I don't know why I keep looking at the button. Like I'm like the lens is right there, but I keep like looking at the button. I think I'm tired. So make sure that you leave a comment on this video. Let me know what you liked about it. Let me know what other movies I should be doing on this channel. We are going to be heading back to the parks next week, so join me next week for that, and I will see you guys next time.